July 4th, Independence Day, the day when every American celebrates freedom, family, and belonging. But what happens when you're excluded from your own family's celebration? What happens when you're left alone on the sidewalk while everyone else celebrates? Picture this: an elderly man sits crying on the sidewalk, excluded from the July 4th party happening right behind him. The fireworks light up the sky, but his world is dark. The laughter echoes from the backyard, but he hears only silence. Excluded, forgotten, alone. But sometimes, when you least expect it, a stranger can change everything. Sometimes, on the sidewalk of despair, hope arrives in worn blue jeans and a weathered guitar. Sometimes Bruce Springsteen shows up in your backyard, and what was meant to be your worst July 4th becomes a celebration you'll never forget. This is the story of Walter Mitchell, a 78-year-old veteran who was excluded from his own family's party. And this is how one unexpected visitor transformed his tears into triumph on that unforgettable July 4th evening. The sun was setting over Freehold, New Jersey, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson that seemed to bleed into the American flags hanging from every porch on Maple Street. It was July 4th, 2023, and the air was thick with the smell of barbecue smoke and the distant crackle of firecrackers. Children's laughter echoed through the neighborhood, mixing with the sound of country music and clinking beer bottles. It was the kind of evening that postcards are made of, the kind that makes you believe in the American dream. But on the sidewalk outside 247 Maple Street, Walter Mitchell sat alone on the concrete curb, his weathered hands trembling as they wiped tears from his deeply lined face. At 78 years old, Walter had seen many July 4th celebrations, but none had ever hurt quite like this one. Behind him, separated by a white picket fence that might as well have been a prison wall, his own family was celebrating without him. The backyard was full of people: his son David, his daughter-in-law Jennifer, his 3 grandchildren, and at least 30 other guests. Red, white and blue streamers decorated the trees, and a large banner reading "Happy Independence Day" stretched across the patio. The grill was smoking with hamburgers and hot dogs, and a table groaned under the weight of potato salad, coleslaw, apple pie, and countless other dishes. Walter could hear his grandson Tommy's voice, the boy he'd taught to throw a baseball, laughing at something someone had said. He could hear his granddaughter Sarah playing her violin, the same violin he'd bought her for her 10th birthday. He could smell Jennifer's famous cornbread, the recipe she'd actually gotten from Walter's late wife, Margaret. But Walter wasn't invited. The tears came harder now, and he didn't even try to stop them. What was the point? No one was watching. No one cared. The sidewalk was his domain now, this narrow strip of public concrete where he had every right to be, even if he had no right to step 3 feet backward into the yard that had once been his home. It had started 6 months ago, though if Walter was honest with himself, the seeds had been planted years before. David had always been ambitious, always reaching for something more, something better. Walter had been proud of that once. His son, the lawyer. His son, the success story. But somewhere along the way, David had started seeing his father not as the man who'd worked double shifts at the factory to pay for his education, but as an embarrassment. "Dad, you can't keep telling those old war stories," David had said one day. "People don't want to hear about Vietnam anymore." "Dad, maybe you shouldn't wear that old Marine's cap everywhere," he'd said another time. "It's a bit much." "Dad, when Jennifer's parents come over, maybe just try not to talk about politics, okay?" Little by little, Walter had been edited out of his own family's life. First, it was the important dinners. Then the holiday gatherings became immediate family only, a term that somehow didn't include him. Then came the fight about Margaret's inheritance, about the house, about the money Walter had saved his whole life, and whether David deserved it now or should wait. The final blow had come 2 weeks ago. Walter had shown up to Tommy's birthday party uninvited, just wanting to give his grandson a present. a baseball glove, just like the one Walter's own father had given him. Jennifer had met him at the door. "Walter, you can't just show up like this," she'd said, her voice cold as January rain. "David made it clear. Until you apologize and agree to our terms about the estate, you're not welcome here." "But it's Tommy's birthday," Walter had said, his voice breaking. "I'm his grandfather." "David's made his decision," Jennifer had replied, and closed the door in his face. So here Walter sat on July 4th, Independence Day, the day he'd fought for in Da Nang, the day he'd lost 3 fingers for in a jungle firefight, the day he'd earned the right to celebrate by bleeding red on foreign soil for the white and blue of his flag. Here he sat, excluded from his own family's celebration, listening to the party continue without him, as if he'd never existed at all. A car drove slowly down Maple Street, its headlights not yet on in the dying light. Walter didn't look up. He didn't care who saw him crying. What was dignity to a man who'd been stripped of everything else? The car stopped. Walter heard the engine idle for a moment, then shut off. A door opened and closed. Footsteps approached, unhurried but purposeful. Someone sat down on the curb beside him, close enough that Walter could smell cologne. Something simple and woody, not expensive, but genuine. "Hell of a place to spend the 4th, a gravelly voice said. Walter looked up through his tears and found himself staring at a face he recognized but couldn't quite place. The man was probably in his early 70s, with deeply lined features and intelligent eyes that held both weariness and warmth. He wore faded jeans, a black t-shirt, and beaten-up boots. There was something familiar about him, something that tickled the back of Walter's memory. "Yeah, well," Walter said, his voice rough from crying, "not everyone gets invited to the party." The stranger nodded, looking past Walter at the celebration in the backyard. "That your family in there?" Walter laughed bitterly. "Supposedly, though you wouldn't know it from the invitation list. What happened?" There was something in the way the stranger asked, not prying, not judging, just genuinely curious, that made Walter want to answer. Maybe it was the loneliness, maybe it was the pain, or maybe it was just the human need to be heard by someone, anyone, on a night when the world had forgotten him. "My son decided I'm more trouble than I'm worth," Walter said. "Apparently I embarrass him. My stories are too old, my opinions too strong, my expectations too high. I worked my whole life to give him everything, and now that he has it, he doesn't want the reminder of where it came from." The stranger was quiet for a moment, then said, "I wrote a song once about a father and son. My Pa, I called it. Never released it, but I played it a few times. It was about how we spend our whole lives trying to prove something to our fathers, and our fathers spend their whole lives trying to give us something to prove. Sometimes we get so caught up in the trying, we forget about the loving." Walter turned to look at the stranger more carefully. There was definitely something familiar about him, something in the voice, the way he held himself. "You're a musician?" The stranger smiled slightly. "Something like that. Name's Bruce." And then it clicked. Walter's eyes widened. "Bruce Springsteen." Bruce nodded. "Guilty as charged. Though tonight, I'm just a guy who saw another guy looking like he could use some company." Walter couldn't believe it. Bruce Springsteen, the boss himself, was sitting on a curb in Freehold with him. "What are you doing here?" "I grew up not far from here," Bruce said. "Sometimes on the 4th I like to drive through the old neighborhoods, see how they're celebrating. Reminds me of where I came from. Saw you sitting here and, well, something told me to stop." "You stop for me?" Walter's voice was incredulous. "Walter, it is Walter, right? I heard someone call that name from the yard. Walter, I've been where you are. Maybe not exactly, but close enough. I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong in your own story anymore, like everybody's moved on to the next verse and left you behind in the chorus." Walter felt fresh tears coming, but these were different somehow. "I served in Vietnam," he said suddenly, needing Bruce to understand. 3 tours, came back with 2 Purple Hearts and 3 less fingers than I left with." He held up his left hand, showing where his ring finger, pinky, and middle finger had been blown off at the second knuckle. I worked at the Nestle factory for 37 years after that. Never missed a day. Never complained. Put David through law school, put Sarah through medical school before she died. My daughter, not the granddaughter. Cancer took her when she was 31. Bruce listened without interrupting, his presence solid and reassuring. My wife Margaret died 3 years ago, Walter continued. Alzheimer's. Last 2 years she didn't even know who I was, but I sat with her every day, read her the same books over and over, sang her the same songs. David said I was wasting my time, that I should put her in a home and move on. How do you move on from 52 years of marriage? How do you warehouse the woman who gave you everything? You don't, Bruce said simply. You honor it. You honor her. You did right, Walter. Then why am I out here? Walter's voice broke completely. Why am I sitting on a sidewalk on Independence Day, excluded from my own family's celebration? What did I do that was so wrong? Bruce was quiet for a long moment, looking at the party in the backyard. Then he stood up, surprising Walter. Come on, he said, offering his hand. Where are we going? We're going to that party. Walter shook his head quickly. I can't. They made it clear I'm not welcome. Jennifer will call the police. Bruce smiled, and there was something in that smile that Walter recognized, the same rebellious spirit that had written Born to Run and Born in the USA, the same defiance that had sung truth to power for 50 years. Walter, it's Independence Day. You fought for this country, you bled for it, you gave it your fingers, your youth, your innocence. You earned the right to celebrate it anywhere you damn well please. And if they want to call the cops on Bruce Springsteen for bringing a veteran to a 4th of July party, well, that'll make one hell of a headline, won't it? Despite everything, Walter found himself almost smiling. You're serious? As a heart attack. Come on, Marine, let's crash this party. Bruce helped Walter to his feet. The older man's knees protested after sitting on the concrete for so long, but Bruce steadied him. Together, they walked to the gate in the white picket fence. The party sounds grew louder, music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Bruce opened the gate without hesitation and walked through, Walter beside him. The backyard was even more festive up close. Lights were strung between the trees, casting a warm glow over everything. The guests were a mix of ages, from children running around with sparklers to elderly couples sitting in lawn chairs. The smell of grilled meat was intoxicating, and the table of food looked like a magazine spread. It took about 10 seconds for someone to notice them. "Oh my God," a woman's voice said. Is that Bruce Springsteen?" The party noise dimmed like someone had turned down a volume knob. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. David, standing by the grill in a polo shirt and khakis, turned to see what everyone was looking at. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, recognition, shock, and then anger when he saw his father. "Dad, what are you doing here?" David's voice was tight, controlled, but with an edge of panic. "And who is—" He trailed off as he realized who was standing next to his father. "Evening," Bruce said casually. "Hope you don't mind. I was driving by and saw Walter here sitting on the curb. Thought I'd make sure he got to his family's party safely." Jennifer appeared at David's side, her face flushed. "Mr. Mitchell, you need to leave. We've discussed this." "Now hold on," Bruce said, his voice still friendly but with steel underneath. "I'm confused. This is Walter Mitchell, right? Marine veteran, Purple Heart recipient, the man who worked his fingers to the bone, literally, to put his son through law school. And this is his family's 4th of July party, but he's not invited." The backyard was dead silent now. Every guest was watching, and more than a few had their phones out, recording. David's face was red. "This is a private family matter, Mr. Springsteen. I'm a big fan, but—" "Family matter," Bruce repeated, "on Independence Day. You're excluding a Vietnam veteran from an Independence Day celebration, his own family's celebration." "You don't understand the situation," Jennifer said coldly. "Then explain it to me," Bruce said. because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're telling a man who lost 3 fingers defending this country that he can't celebrate it with his own grandchildren. Is that about right? Tommy, Walter's grandson, pushed through the crowd. He was 16, tall and lanky, with Walter's eyes. "Grandpa?" he said, his voice uncertain. "What's going on?" "Tommy," David said sharply, "go back to your friends." But Tommy was looking at Bruce now, his eyes wide. "Holy shit, you're Bruce Springsteen." "Language!" Jennifer snapped. Bruce smiled at the kid. "You must be Tommy. Your grandfather's told me about you. Says he taught you to throw a curveball." "He did," Tommy said, glancing between his grandfather and his parents. "Best curveball on the team." "I believe it," Bruce said. Then he turned back to David. "Look, I don't know all the details of your family situation, and frankly, it's none of my business. But what is my business, what's every American's business, is how we treat our veterans, how we treat our elders, how we treat the people who sacrificed everything so we could stand here in this beautiful backyard, drinking cold beer and eating hot dogs in freedom." "It's complicated," David said, but his voice was less certain now. "Most things are," Bruce agreed. "But some things are simple. Respect is simple. Gratitude is simple. Love is simple. Walter here didn't ask for much. He just wanted to be included, to be remembered, to be valued. That's so complicated." Sarah, Walter's granddaughter, now 22 and home from college, stepped forward. "Dad, he's right. This is wrong. Grandpa should be here." "Sarah, stay out of this," Jennifer warned. But Sarah shook her head. "No, I've stayed out of it for 6 months and I'm done. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you sooner." She walked over and hugged Walter, who started crying again, but differently this time. Tommy joined them, wrapping his arms around his grandfather. "I missed you, Grandpa," Tommy said. "Dad said you didn't want to see us, but that wasn't true, was it?" Walter could barely speak. "Never, son. I never didn't want to see you." The youngest grandchild, Lily, who was only 8, ran over and grabbed Walter's leg. "Grandpa! Grandpa's here! Can you tell us a war story?" David's face was a study in conflicting emotions. The guests were all watching, many still recording. Bruce Springsteen was standing in his backyard, defending his father. His children were embracing the grandfather he'd tried to exclude. The narrative he'd built was crumbling. Bruce walked over to David and spoke quietly, but in the silence of the yard, everyone could hear. "I know something about complicated fathers," he said. "Wrote half my songs about mine. He was difficult, stubborn, probably bipolar, though we didn't call it that then. We fought constantly, but you know what? I'd give anything to have him at my 4th of July party now. To hear his stories one more time, even the ones I'd heard 100 times before. To see him smile at his grandchildren. To tell him I'm sorry for all the times I was embarrassed by him, all the times I wished he was different." David's facade finally cracked. His eyes filled with tears he'd probably been holding back for years. Bruce continued, "Your father isn't perfect. No father is. But he's here, and he loves you, and he loves those kids. And someday, sooner than you think, he won't be. And you'll stand at his grave and wish to God you could take back this moment, this 4th of July, when you made him sit on the sidewalk while his family celebrated without him. He won't agree to our terms about the money," David said weakly, his last defense. "The money?" Bruce laughed, but it wasn't cruel. "Son, look at your house, look at your car, look at your life. You're a successful lawyer. You don't need his money. You want it, sure, but you don't need it. But those kids, they need their grandfather. And whether you admit it or not, you need your father. The money will be gone someday, spent and forgotten. But this moment, this choice you make right now, this is what you'll remember. This is what will matter." The entire backyard held its breath. David looked at his father, held by his children, tears streaming down the old Marine's weathered face. He looked at Bruce Springsteen, rock legend, standing in his backyard like some kind of guardian angel in denim. He looked at his wife, whose cold certainty had wavered. He looked at the guests, his friends and colleagues, all witnessing this moment. "Dad," David said, and his voice broke. "Dad, I'm sorry." Walter looked up, hardly daring to believe. David walked over slowly, each step seeming to take enormous effort. "I'm sorry, Dad. I've been an ass. A complete, total ass. I got so caught up in, I don't even know what. Being successful, being important, being different from where I came from. I forgot who helped me get here." He stood in front of his father now, this successful lawyer in his polo shirt, facing the factory worker in his worn clothes, the son facing the father, the present facing the past. "Can you forgive me?" David asked. Walter pulled his son into a fierce hug, the kind of hug that says everything words can't. David broke down completely, sobbing into his father's shoulder like he was 10 years old again and had just struck out in Little League. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. The money doesn't matter. None of it matters. I wanted you to be proud of me." "I've always been proud of you," Walter said, holding his son. "Always, even when you were being a jackass." That broke the tension, and people laughed, some wiping away tears of their own. Bruce smiled and started to back away, but Walter called out, "Bruce, wait. Please, stay for the party." Bruce shook his head. "This is your moment, Walter, your family." "But you made it happen," Walter insisted. "No," Bruce said. "It was always going to happen. Sometimes we just need a little push to remember what matters. Besides, I've got my own party to get to. My family's waiting." He started to leave, then turned back. "Actually, wait 1 second." Bruce walked to his car and came back with an acoustic guitar. The backyard went silent again. "Before I go," Bruce said, "I want to play something for Walter. For all the Walters out there who've been forgotten, excluded, pushed aside. For all the veterans who came home to a country that didn't always know how to welcome them back. For all the fathers and mothers who gave everything and asked for so little in return." He strummed a few chords, finding the key, and then began to sing. It wasn't one of his famous songs. It was something new, something he seemed to be creating right there in the moment, or maybe something he'd been carrying around waiting for the right time to share. There's a man on the sidewalk on the 4th of July, tears on his cheeks while the fireworks fly, gave his fingers and his youth to a foreign war. Now he's standing on the outside of his own front door. But freedom isn't free. No, freedom has a cost, and sometimes those who paid it are the ones we've lost. Not to bullets or to battles on some distant shore, but to the silence and the closing of our own heart's door. So here's to the forgotten, the left behind, the lone. Here's to the warriors who can't find their way home, not because the path is gone or the bridge is burned away, but because we've forgotten what Independence Day really means to say. It means welcome home, soldier. Your war is done. It means sit here beside me, father, mother, daughter, son. It means the price you paid was worth more than gold. It means your stories matter and deserve to be told. So open up the gate, let the exiled come in. The celebration's not complete until we all begin to remember that freedom was bought with sacrifice and pain, and those who bought it for us deserve to share the gain. As Bruce played, something magical happened. Other neighbors had come out of their houses drawn by the music. The sidewalk filled with people, some holding small American flags, some with children on their shoulders. When Bruce finished, the applause wasn't just from David's backyard, but from the entire street. Bruce handed the guitar to Tommy. "Your grandfather tells me you play a little." Tommy took the guitar reverently. "A little, yeah." "Play something for him," Bruce said. "Play something for your grandfather." As Tommy began to play, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, Bruce shook Walter's hand one more time. "Thank you," Walter said, gripping Bruce's hand tight with his remaining fingers. "Thank you for giving me my family back." "I didn't give you anything," Bruce said. "They were always yours. Sometimes we just need to be reminded of what we have before it's gone." He looked at David. "Take care of him. You don't get many more chances like this." David nodded, unable to speak. Bruce walked back through the gate, and the crowd parted for him like he was Moses at the Red Sea. He got in his car, started the engine, and drove away into the New Jersey night, leaving behind a transformed 4th of July party. Walter was immediately surrounded by guests who wanted to shake his hand, thank him for his service, hear his stories. The ones David had been embarrassed by were suddenly the most requested. Children gathered around as he told them about the jungle, about fear and bravery, about what it meant to serve something bigger than yourself. Jennifer approached him hesitantly, a plate of food in her hands. "Walter, I owe you an apology too. I let my pride and my need to control everything get in the way of what was right. You're welcome here, always. This is your home too." Walter took the plate gratefully. "Thank you, Jennifer. That means more than you know." As the night went on, the party became something more than just a 4th of July celebration. It became a reconciliation, a healing, a remembering of what family really meant. Tommy played guitar while Sarah sang. Lily sat on Walter's lap, playing with his remaining fingers and asking endless questions about the war, about Grandma Margaret, about the old days. David sat next to his father, not saying much, just being there. At one point, he said, "Dad, tell me about Mom. Tell me about how you met." Walter smiled, the first real smile he'd had in months. "Well, it was 1968, and I'd just gotten back from my first tour. There was this dance at the VFW Hall." As Walter told the story, the fireworks began. Great bursts of color exploded across the sky, reflecting in the eyes of the 3 generations gathered in the backyard. Walter thought about Bruce Springsteen, about the gift he'd been given, about the strange turns life could take. He'd started the evening excluded, sitting on a sidewalk, crying into his hands. Now he was surrounded by family, by love, by acceptance. The grandchildren who'd been kept from him were hanging on his every word. The son who'd rejected him was holding his hand. The damaged one, the one with missing fingers, the one that told the story of sacrifice. "Grandpa," Lily said, looking up at him with serious eyes, "were you scared in the war?" "Every day," Walter said honestly. "But being scared doesn't mean you're not brave. Being brave means doing what needs to be done, even when you're scared. Like coming to the party tonight, even though you were sad." Walter looked at his granddaughter in amazement. 8 years old, and she understood more than most adults. "Yeah," he said, his voice thick. "Exactly like that." David squeezed his father's shoulder. "Dad, I want you to move back in. Not to the basement apartment, but to the main house. To Mom's old craft room. We'll make it yours. The kids need you here. I need you here." Walter looked at his son, searching his face. "What about the money, the estate?" "Forget the money," David said. "Keep it, donate it, bury it in the backyard. I don't care. I just want my father back. I want my kids to have their grandfather. I want to have the chance to make this right." "It won't be easy," Walter warned. "I'm still the same opinionated, storytelling, marine cap-wearing old fool I was before." David laughed, and it was genuine. "Good. The kids need to hear those stories. I need to hear them. I forgot, Dad. I forgot where I came from. I forgot what you sacrificed. I forgot that everything I have is because you gave me the chance to have it." The fireworks reached their grand finale, explosion after explosion, painting the night sky in red, white, and blue. The entire neighborhood was watching, and for a moment it felt like all of Freehold, all of New Jersey, all of America was celebrating not just independence, but interdependence, the connections that bound them together, the sacrifices that had been made, the love that endured even through rejection and pain. As the last firework faded, leaving only smoke and the ghost of light in the sky, Walter found himself thinking about Bruce's song, about being on the outside looking in, about the cost of freedom, about the importance of remembering. "Hey, Dad," David said suddenly, "do you still have that old guitar, the one you used to play when we were kids?" Walter nodded. "It's in my apartment. Haven't touched it in years." Bring it when you move in. Maybe you can teach Tommy some of those old songs you used to play. I'd like that, Walter said. The party continued late into the night, but it was different now. It had been transformed from a simple 4th of July barbecue into something deeper, something more meaningful. Neighbors who had come for the Bruce Springsteen sighting stayed for Walter's stories. The veterans among them shared their own experiences. The young people listened with a new understanding of what the holiday really meant. At one point, Walter saw a man about his age standing alone by the fence, looking uncertain. Walter recognized the look. It was the same one he'd had hours earlier, the look of someone who wasn't sure they belonged. Walter walked over. "Hey there, I'm Walter. You here for the party?" The man shook his head. "No, I heard the music. Bruce Springsteen, right? I couldn't believe it. I saw him play at the Stone Pony in '74. "Well, come on in," Walter said, opening the gate. "Any friend of Bruce's is a friend of mine. We've got plenty of food, and I was just about to tell the story of the time I met Bob Dylan in a Minneapolis bus station." The man's face lit up. "Really? Well, I thought it was Bob Dylan. Turned out to be just a very confused rabbinical student, but it's a hell of a story anyway." The man laughed and followed Walter into the yard. "Because that's what you did on Independence Day. You opened the gate. You welcomed the stranger. You shared your food and your stories and your celebration. You remembered that freedom wasn't just about being independent, it was about choosing to be together." As the night finally wound down and guests began to leave, Walter sat in a lawn chair, exhausted but happy. His grandchildren were asleep in various positions around him. Lily on his lap, Tommy sprawled on the grass at his feet, Sarah dozed in the chair beside him. David and Jennifer were cleaning up, working together with the easy rhythm of a couple who'd remembered how to be partners. Walter thought about Margaret, his late wife. She would have loved this. She would have loved seeing the family together again. She would have loved the story of Bruce Springsteen showing up like some denim-clad guardian angel. She would have cried at the reconciliation and laughed at the idea of her husband, the old Marine, becoming the star of the party. "I wish you could see this, Maggie," he whispered to the stars. "I wish you could see our boy coming back to us. I wish you could see your grandchildren sleeping here under the stars. I wish you could know that it all worked out." A warm breeze stirred, carrying the lingering smell of barbecue and spent fireworks, and Walter could almost feel Margaret's presence, her hand on his shoulder, her voice in his ear saying what she always said when things got tough. "It's going to be okay, Walter. Love always finds a way." David came over and sat in the grass beside his father's chair, looking up at the stars. "Dad?" "Yes, son?" "Tell me about the day I was born. Tell me about what you felt when you first held me." Walter smiled in the darkness. "Well, it was the second best day of my life, right after the day I married your mother. You were so small, but you had this grip. You grabbed my finger, my whole finger back when I had all of them, and you wouldn't let go. And I remember thinking, this is it. This is what I fought for. This is what it was all about. This little hand holding mine." David reached up and took his father's damaged hand, holding it carefully, reverently. "I'm holding on again, Dad, and this time I'm not letting go." They sat there in silence, father and son, watching the stars and listening to the distant sound of fireworks from other celebrations. Somewhere in New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen was probably with his own family, but his spirit lingered here in this backyard, in the reconciliation he'd sparked, in the reminder he'd given about what really mattered. The next morning, Walter woke up in his son's house for the first time in 6 months. He could smell coffee brewing and hear bacon sizzling. He made his way to the kitchen where Jennifer was cooking breakfast and the kids were already at the table. "Morning, Grandpa," Lily called out. "Mom's making your favorite, bacon and eggs with the runny yolks." "How did you know that was my favorite?" Walter asked Jennifer. She smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him in years. "David told me. He remembers everything about you, Walter. Even when he was being stupid, he remembered." David came in from outside, carrying Walter's guitar from his apartment. "Thought we could start those lessons today, Dad, if you're up for it." Walter took the guitar, his shortened fingers finding the familiar chords with some difficulty, but with muscle memory that transcended physical limitation. "I'm always up for it." As the family gathered around the breakfast table, Tommy said, "Grandpa, do you think Bruce Springsteen will ever come back?" Walter thought about it. "Probably not, son, but he doesn't need to. He already gave us what we needed." "What was that?" Sarah asked. "A reminder," Walter said. "A reminder that we belong to each other, that family isn't about being perfect or agreeing on everything. It's about showing up. It's about opening the gate when someone's on the outside. It's about remembering that love is bigger than pride." "That should be a song," Tommy said. Walter strummed a chord on the guitar. "Maybe it will be." The weeks that followed were not without their challenges. Old habits died hard, and there were moments of tension. David still sometimes bristled at his father's political opinions. Jennifer still occasionally felt her space was being invaded. The kids sometimes grew tired of hearing the same war stories, but they worked through it, because that's what families did. They disagreed and argued and frustrated each other, but they stayed, they showed up. They remembered what Bruce Springsteen had taught them that 4th of July night, that the celebration wasn't complete until everyone was included. Walter started a tradition of Sunday dinners, where the whole family would gather, and anyone else who needed a place to belong was welcome. Veterans from the VFW, lonely neighbors, single parents from Tommy's school. The table kept expanding, and there was always room for one more. One Sunday, about 2 months after the 4th of July, there was a knock at the door during dinner. David went to answer it and came back with an envelope. "It's addressed to you, Dad," he said, handing it to Walter. Walter opened it with his damaged hands, the kids helping him with the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. "Walter, heard you've been continuing the celebration. Good. That's what it's all about. Keeping the gate open, keeping the table full, keeping the stories alive. Enclosed are tickets to my show at MetLife Stadium next month. Bring the whole family. Bring the whole neighborhood if you want. Some things are worth fighting for. Family's at the top of that list. Your friend, Bruce P.S. Tell Tommy to keep practicing that guitar. Maybe one day he'll play me something." The tickets spilled out onto the table, 20 of them, enough for the entire extended family and then some. "Are these real?" Sarah asked, examining them. "As real as that night," Walter said, his eyes wet again. The night of the concert, Walter sat in the stadium, surrounded by his family, David and Jennifer, the 3 grandchildren, various cousins and friends who'd become family. When Bruce took the stage, the crowd of 60,000 roared, but Walter could have sworn Bruce looked right at their section and gave a little nod. Midway through the concert, Bruce paused between songs. "I want to tell you all a story," he said to the massive crowd. "About a 4th of July in Freehold and a Marine named Walter and what it means to come home." He told the story to 60,000 people, and when he was done, he said, "Walter, if you're out here tonight, this one's for you." He played the song he'd improvised in the backyard, but now it was full and rich, with the E Street Band behind him. The entire stadium sang along with the chorus, "Open up the gate, let the exiled come in. The celebration's not complete until we all begin." Walter stood, and his family stood with him, and then their entire section stood, and then, incredibly, the entire stadium rose to their feet. 60,000 people standing for one old Marine who'd almost been forgotten. After the concert, a security guard found them and said Bruce wanted to see them backstage. They were led through corridors and past equipment to a simple room where Bruce sat on a couch, looking tired but satisfied. "Walter," he said, standing and embracing the old man. "How have you been?" "Better than I deserve," Walter said. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to your family," Bruce corrected. "They just needed a reminder. We all do sometimes." He turned to Tommy, who was carrying his guitar. "You bring that for a reason?" Tommy nodded shyly. "I wanted to play you something, the song Grandpa taught me." "Well, let's hear it." Tommy played "This Land Is Your Land," and his young voice was clear and true. When he finished, Bruce clapped genuinely. "You've got something, kid. Keep at it. And keep learning from your grandfather. He's got more to teach than just music." As they were leaving, Bruce called out, "Walter." Walter turned back. "You ever need anything, you call me. I mean it. You've got family here, too." Walter nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The ride home was quiet, each of them processing what had happened. Finally, Lily, always the one to say what everyone was thinking, spoke up. "Grandpa, you're famous now." Walter laughed. "No, sweetheart, I'm just a lucky old man who got a second chance." "We all did," David said from the driver's seat. "We all got a second chance." As they pulled into the driveway of the house on Maple Street, Walter saw something that stopped his heart. There, sitting on the same curb where he'd cried on the 4th of July, was another old man, alone, shoulders shaking. "Stop the car," Walter said. He got out and walked over to the man, his family watching from the car. "Hell of a place to spend the night," Walter said, sitting down beside him. The man looked up, startled. My son, we had a fight. He said I wasn't welcome anymore." Walter nodded. "I know that feeling. What's your name?" "Carl Peterson." "Well, Carl, I'm Walter Mitchell, and if you're hungry, we've got leftover lasagna and a table with an empty chair. Come on." Carl looked at him in confusion. "You don't know me." "Didn't need to," Walter said. "Someone once did the same for me. Opened the gate when I was on the outside. Least I can do is pass it on." He helped Carl to his feet and led him toward the house, where his family was waiting, where the lights were warm, where there was always room for one more at the table, because that's what Bruce had taught them. That's what that 4th of July had really been about. Not just one family's reconciliation, but a reminder of what America could be at its best. A place where no one had to sit on the sidewalk alone, where veterans were honored, where families could heal, where strangers could become friends, where someone like Bruce Springsteen could stop his car and change everything with a simple act of kindness. The story of Walter Mitchell and the 4th of July, when Bruce Springsteen crashed his family's party, became legend in Freehold. But more than that, it became a catalyst. Other families reached out to estranged members. The VFW started a program pairing lonely veterans with local families for holidays. The town instituted No One Alone Independence Day, where every celebration was open to anyone who needed a place to belong. Years later, when Walter finally passed at the age of 85, his funeral was standing room only. Bruce Springsteen sent flowers with a note, "For the Marine who taught us all what coming home really means." David gave the eulogy, and he told the story of that 4th of July, of his father on the sidewalk, of pride and forgiveness, and the power of an open gate. "My father fought in Vietnam," David said to the packed church. "He lost 3 fingers in that war, but that wasn't his greatest sacrifice, or his greatest victory. His greatest battle was for his family, and his greatest victory was teaching us that love is stronger than pride, that forgiveness is more powerful than anger, and that it's never too late to open the gate and let someone come home." Tommy, now in his 20s and a musician himself, played the song Bruce had sung in their backyard. Sarah, a doctor like her late aunt, read from the letters Walter had written her from the war. Lily, studying to be a teacher, told stories of all the Sunday dinners, all the strangers who became family around their grandfather's ever-expanding table. And somewhere in New Jersey, Bruce Springsteen sat at his own table reading about Walter's passing in the newspaper. He picked up his guitar and started writing a new song, one about ordinary heroes and extraordinary grace, about the men and women who came back from war only to fight new battles at home, about the families that failed and then found each other again. The song would never be recorded, never be performed in stadiums. But sometimes, on quiet 4th of July evenings, Bruce would play it for his own family, and he'd tell them about Walter Mitchell, the Marine who reminded him what Independence Day really meant. Because in the end, that's what the story was about. Not about celebrity or fame, or even about Bruce Springsteen, really. It was about Walter Mitchell and all the Walter Mitchells out there. The forgotten fathers, the excluded mothers, the grandparents on the sidewalk while their families celebrated without them. It was about remembering that independence without interdependence is just loneliness with a fancy name. It was about the truth that we all need each other, that we all belong to each other, that the gate should always be open for one more. On the first 4th of July after Walter's death, David stood in the same backyard, now hosting a party for over 100 people, family, friends, veterans, neighbors, strangers who'd heard about the Mitchell family's open-door policy. He raised a beer to the sky. "To Walter Mitchell," he said, "to all the Walter Mitchells, to the ones who served, who sacrificed, who never stopped loving even when love wasn't returned. To the ones on the sidewalk, may they always find someone to open the gate." The crowd echoed the toast, and fireworks began to explode across the New Jersey sky. David's son, Walter's great-grandson, born just months before the old Marine died and named Walter in his honor, gurgled in his mother's arms. "You see that, little Walter?" David said to his infant son. "Those fireworks are for your great-grandfather, for all the great-grandfathers, for everyone who ever fought for something bigger than themselves." Jennifer touched David's arm. "He would have loved this." "He does love it," David corrected. "Wherever he is, he's loving this." As if in response, a particularly spectacular firework exploded directly overhead, showering the yard in golden light. For just a moment, everyone could have sworn they heard music. A guitar playing, a gravelly voice singing about open gates and coming home. It was probably just imagination, just the echo of memory and loss and love. But then again, on a night when anything could happen, when rock stars could appear on sidewalks and families could heal and strangers could become family, who was to say what was real and what was magic? The party continued late into the night. Stories being told, songs being sung, new connections being made. The gate stayed open, and people wandered in from the street, drawn by the warmth and the welcome. No one was turned away. No one sat on the sidewalk alone. This was Walter Mitchell's legacy, not money or property or even the purple hearts in their frame on the wall. It was this, a family that had learned to choose love over pride, inclusion over exclusion, forgiveness over resentment. It was a backyard where everyone belonged, a table that could always stretch to accommodate one more, a celebration that wasn't complete until everyone was included. And somewhere perhaps Bruce Springsteen was writing another song, one that would capture this truth, that the real American dream wasn't about making it on your own. It was about making sure no one had to. It was about remembering that we're all in this together, that your struggle is my struggle, that your joy is my joy, that your father is my father, that your celebration is my celebration. Because on Independence Day and every day, we declare our independence not from each other, but from the forces that would divide us. We declare our freedom not to stand alone, but to stand together. We declare our right not just to pursue happiness, but to share it. That's what Walter Mitchell knew, sitting on that curb with tears on his face. That's what Bruce Springsteen remembered, stopping his car on a New Jersey street. That's what David learned, opening his arms to his father. That's what they all discovered that 4th of July when the gate opened and the exiled came home. The story ends where it began, on Maple Street in Freehold, New Jersey, on a 4th of July evening. But now the sidewalk is empty. Everyone is inside the gate at the table, part of the celebration. The fireworks reflect in windows and eyes and raised glasses. Children run with sparklers, tracing light into the darkness. Old men tell stories that everyone has heard, but everyone needs to hear again. Mothers and fathers hold each other and remember why they fell in love. Strangers become friends. Friends become family. Family becomes what it was always meant to be. Not perfect, but present. Not without conflict, but committed to working through it. Not exclusive, but expansive. And if you listen carefully, if you tune out the fireworks and the laughter and the clink of glasses, you can hear it. The sound of gates opening all over America, all over the world. The sound of people saying, "Come in, you belong here, your family." The sound of Walter Mitchell's "Everywhere" finally coming home. That's the story of the 4th of July, when Bruce Springsteen crashed a party and changed a family forever. But more than that, it's the story of all of us, of what we can be when we remember what matters, when we choose love over pride, when we open the gate and let each other in. Because in the end, that's what independence really means. Not the freedom to be alone, but the freedom to choose to be together. Not the right to exclude, but the responsibility to include. Not the power to reject, but the courage to reconcile. Happy Independence Day, Walter Mitchell. Happy Independence Day to all the Walter Mitchells. Happy Independence Day to everyone who's ever been on the outside looking in. The gate is open, the table is set. The celebration isn't complete without you. Come home. Epilogue. 5 years later. Tommy Mitchell stood on the stage at the Stone Pony in Asbury Park, his grandfather's guitar in his hands. At 21, he'd inherited Walter's eyes, David's ambition, and somehow, through the mysterious alchemy of genetics and environment, a voice that could make people stop and listen. The bar was packed, which was unusual for a Tuesday night. But word had gotten out. Word always got out in New Jersey when something special was happening. "This next song," Tommy said into the microphone, "is about my grandfather. He passed away 2 years ago, but he taught me everything I know about music, about courage, about what it means to come home." He started to play, and the crowd fell silent. The song was simple, just 3 chords and the truth. But sometimes that's all you need. There's a sidewalk in Freehold where my grandpa cried, "On the 4th of July, on the 4th of July, cast out by his family, wounded in his pride, on the 4th of July, on the 4th of July." In the back of the bar, hidden in the shadows where the stage lights didn't reach, Bruce Springsteen stood watching. He'd heard about the kid, Walter's grandson, playing the clubs, carrying on the tradition. He'd had to see for himself. But a stranger stopped and saw him there, a stranger who decided to care, and sometimes that's all it takes to save a life. A stranger who cares on the 4th of July. Tommy's voice grew stronger, more confident, and Bruce could see Walter in him. The same determination, the same refusal to give up, the same belief that music could change things, could heal things, could bring people home. Now the gate stays open and the table's always full. In that house in Freehold, where everyone's welcome and no one's left to pull. Their heart out in Freehold, their heart out in Freehold. When the song ended, the applause was immediate and sustained. Tommy smiled, and it was Walter's smile, the one Bruce remembered from that night 5 years ago. Bruce made his way to the bar, ordered a beer, and waited. After the set, Tommy came over, not recognizing him at first in the dim light. "Great set, kid," Bruce said. Tommy froze. "Mr. Springsteen?" "Just Bruce. You've gotten good. Walter would be proud." "He is proud," Tommy said with conviction. "I know he is." Bruce smiled. Right. "He is." He paused, then said, "You know, I've been thinking about putting together a benefit concert for veterans' mental health services. Could use an opening act. You interested?" Tommy's mouth fell open. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. But there's a condition. Anything. You play that song, the one about your grandfather, and you tell his story every time because people need to hear it. They need to know that it's never too late to open the gate." Tommy nodded, his eyes wet. "Every time, I promise." Bruce clapped him on the shoulder. "Good. Sarah from my management will call you tomorrow. Keep practicing. And Tommy?" "Yeah?" "Your grandfather saved me too that night. I'd been driving around feeling disconnected, wondering if any of it mattered anymore, the music, the message, any of it. Then I saw him on that curb, and I remembered why I started doing this in the first place, to tell the stories of people like Walter, to remind us all that we belong to each other. He finished his beer and headed for the door, then turned back. "Hey, Tommy, you ever learn that lesson about the curveball?" Tommy grinned. "Best in the state in high school." "That's what I figured. See you at rehearsal." Bruce walked out into the New Jersey night, and Tommy stood there, holding his grandfather's guitar, feeling the weight of legacy and the lightness of possibility. 6 months later, at MetLife Stadium, in front of 40,000 people, Tommy Mitchell told his grandfather's story. He told them about the sidewalk and the tears, about the closed gate and the opened heart, about Bruce Springsteen and the 4th of July that changed everything. Then he played the song, and 40,000 people sang along with the chorus, "Open up the gate, let the exiled come in, the celebration's not complete until we all begin." David and Jennifer were in the front row, along with Sarah and Lily and little Walter, now 5 years old and already showing signs of his great-grandfather's spirit. They cried and sang and remembered. After the concert, backstage, Bruce found David. "He's good," Bruce said, nodding toward Tommy. "Really good." "He learned from the best," David said. "From Dad, from you, from all of us," Bruce corrected. "That's how it works. We all teach each other. We all save each other. One 4th of July at a time." David nodded, then said, "Bruce, I never properly thanked you for what you did, for stopping that night." Bruce shrugged. "I've been thanked enough. Every time I drive through Freehold and see those open gates, those full tables, those families together, that's all the thanks I need." He walked away, then called back, "David, yeah? Your father would be proud of you too, of how you've kept his table going, of how you've kept the gate open." David couldn't speak, just nodded. And so the story continues, rippling outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Every 4th of July, in Freehold and beyond, gates open, tables expand, the exiled come home, strangers become family. Stories are told and retold, each time gathering new meaning, new power. Walter Mitchell's grave in Freehold Cemetery is never without flowers. Veterans leave purple hearts. Families leave photos of their own reconciliations. Musicians leave guitar picks. Someone always leaves a small American flag, and someone always leaves a handwritten note that says simply, "Thank you for keeping the gate open." And every 4th of July, as the sun sets and the fireworks begin, if you know where to look, you can see them, the Walter Mitchells of the world, no longer on the sidewalk, no longer excluded, no longer forgotten. They're at the table, surrounded by family, telling their stories, sharing their wisdom, finally home. That's the real fireworks. That's the real independence. That's the real American dream. Not the solo flight, but the shared journey. Not the closed gate, but the open door. Not the exclusive party, but the ever-expanding table. Bruce Springsteen still drives through Freehold sometimes, especially on the 4th of July. He drives slowly down Maple Street, past the house where it all happened. The parties are bigger now, spilling out onto the street, encompassing the whole neighborhood. Everyone is welcome. Everyone belongs. He never stops anymore. He doesn't need to. The work is done. The gate is open. The message has been received and transmitted and multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined when he stopped his car that night and sat down next to a crying old Marine. But sometimes, just sometimes, he'll slow down enough to hear the music coming from the backyard, to see the generations gathered together, to witness the ongoing miracle of reconciliation and redemption. And he'll smile and think of Walter, and he'll whisper a prayer or a promise or a simple truth. No one sits on the sidewalk alone. Not on my watch. Not on our watch. Not anymore. And then he drives on into the New Jersey night, carrying with him the knowledge that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. That sometimes stopping for one person means saving a whole family. That sometimes a song sung in a backyard can become an anthem for a nation. This is the story of Walter Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen and the 4th of July that changed everything. But really, it's the story of all of us. It's the story of every choice we make to include rather than exclude, to forgive rather than hold grudges, to open rather than close, to love rather than fear. The sidewalk is empty now. Everyone's inside, at the table, part of the celebration. Come in. You belong here. Welcome home. 10 years later, the documentary. The film crew arrived at the Mitchell house on Maple Street early on a humid June morning. Documentary filmmaker Maria Santos had been working on this project for 2 years, tracking down everyone involved in what had become known as the Freehold Miracle, the night Bruce Springsteen saved a family. David Mitchell, now in his 50s with silver threading through his hair, stood in the same backyard where it had all happened. The fence had been removed entirely years ago, creating an open flow between the yard and the sidewalk where his father had once sat crying. "People think they know the story," David said to the camera, his voice steady but emotional. "They know the headlines. Bruce Springsteen crashes party, reunites family. But they don't know what really happened that night. They don't know what led up to it, and they don't know what came after." Maria had interviewed Bruce himself 3 months earlier at his farm in Colts Neck. The rock legend, now in his 70s but still vibrant, had been reluctant at first but eventually agreed because, as he put it, Walter's story needs to be told right. "I almost didn't stop," Bruce had admitted to the camera, sitting in his barn surrounded by guitars and memorabilia. "I'd driven past plenty of sad scenes before, but something about Walter. Maybe it was the way he was sitting, like he'd given up on everything. Or maybe it was because it was the 4th of July, and no one should be alone on the 4th of July. Or maybe it was just God tapping me on the shoulder saying, 'Hey, this one's on you.'" The documentary included footage Maria had uncovered from that night, cell phone videos from party guests, security camera footage from neighbors, even a recording Tommy had made on his phone of Bruce playing the impromptu song. But more importantly, it included the stories of what happened next. There was Carl Peterson, the man Walter had found on the same curb a few months later. Carl had been estranged from his family for 15 years over a business dispute. Walter's kindness had inspired him to reach out to his son. They'd reconciled, and Carl had become a regular at the Mitchell Sunday dinners until his death 3 years ago. There was Rosa Martinez, a young Iraq war veteran who'd been living in her car, too proud to ask for help. She'd heard about the Mitchell family's open-door policy and had shown up one Sunday, suspicious and defensive. Walter had simply handed her a plate and said, "Thank you for your service. Now eat before it gets cold." Rosa now ran a non-profit helping homeless veterans, funded partly by a foundation David had set up in Walter's name. There was Marcus Chen, whose teenage son had run away from home. The boy had ended up at one of the Mitchell dinners, brought by Tommy, who'd found him playing guitar for change at the train station. The reunion between Marcus and his son, facilitated by the Mitchells' gentle intervention, had been another 4th of July miracle 3 years after the first one. "My father used to say," David told the camera, "that every person we help is a seed planted. You don't know what's going to grow from it, but you plant it anyway. You water it with kindness, you give it the sunlight of acceptance, and you wait to see what blooms." The documentary crew interviewed Jennifer, who had perhaps changed the most since that night. The cold, controlling woman who had once barred Walter from her door had become one of the most active volunteers at the Veterans Center. "I was so concerned with appearances," Jennifer admitted, sitting in what had been Walter's room, now a shrine to his memory with his medals, photos, and that old guitar. "I wanted the perfect family, the perfect house, the perfect life. I couldn't see that perfection isn't about excluding the messy parts, it's about embracing them. Walter taught me that. Bruce taught me that. That night taught me that." She pulled out a worn notebook, Walter's handwriting covering the pages. After he moved back in, Walter started writing down his stories. Not just the war stories, but all of them. Stories about meeting Margaret, about raising his kids, about working at the factory. He said he wanted us to have them after he was gone. But I think he was really writing them for everyone, for all the Walter Mitchells out there who think their stories don't matter. The notebook had been published posthumously as From the Sidewalk to the Table, A Marine's Journey Home. All proceeds went to Veterans Mental Health Services. It had become a quiet bestseller, the kind of book people pressed into the hands of estranged family members, the kind that showed up in hospital waiting rooms and therapists' offices, the kind that changed lives one reader at a time. Tommy Mitchell had become a successful musician, though not in the way anyone might have expected. Instead of pursuing rock stardom, he'd become a music therapist, using songs to help veterans process trauma. His program, Guitars for Heroes, had spread to VA hospitals across the country. Grandpa always said music was medicine, Tommy explained to the documentary crew while tuning a guitar in his office at the VA Medical Center. He said it could heal things that words couldn't touch. After that night with Bruce, I saw what he meant. One song played at the right moment can change everything. The camera followed Tommy as he led a group session with veterans, teaching them the song Bruce had sung in the backyard. These tough, broken warriors, some missing limbs, some fighting invisible wounds, sang together, "Open up the gate, let the exiled come in." Several were crying by the end. One veteran, a woman who'd lost her leg in Afghanistan, said, "This song makes me think of my daughter. I pushed her away when I came back. I thought she was better off without me like this. But maybe the gate can still open." Tommy gave her his phone. "Call her right now, don't wait." The documentary captured the call, the tears, the promise to come home for Sunday dinner. Another seed planted. Sarah Mitchell had become a doctor as planned, but her specialty, geriatric psychiatry, had been influenced entirely by her grandfather's story. She worked specifically with elderly veterans dealing with isolation and family estrangement. "We have an epidemic of loneliness among our elderly, especially our veterans," she told the camera in her office, where a photo of Walter in his Marine uniform held pride of place. They come back from war, they build families and careers, and then somehow in their final years they end up alone. Not because they want to be, but because families drift apart, because small resentments become big walls, because we forget that time is limited. She pulled up statistics on her computer. Since that 4th of July, since Grandpa's story went viral, we've seen a 30% decrease in elderly isolation in New Jersey. 30%. That's thousands of people who aren't sitting on metaphorical sidewalks anymore. That's thousands of families who remembered what matters before it was too late. The documentary included a segment on the freehold model, community intervention programs, based on what had happened that night. Cities across America had implemented no one alone holidays, where community volunteers ensured every elderly person, every veteran, every isolated soul had somewhere to go for major celebrations. There was footage from Thanksgiving in Detroit, where 100 volunteers had transformed a VFW hall into a feast for anyone who needed it. Christmas in Seattle, where families adopted isolated elderly people, not just for the day, but for the whole year. 4th of July celebrations from coast to coast, where the Walter Mitchell story was read aloud, reminding everyone to look for the people on the sidewalks. Bruce Springsteen appeared again near the end of the documentary, this time performing at a benefit concert for Veterans Services. Before playing, he spoke to the crowd. 10 years ago, I stopped my car on a street in Freehold. I saw a man crying on a sidewalk. I almost kept driving. We all do it. We see suffering and we think, that's not my problem. Someone else will help. I'm too busy. I'm too important. I'm too something. But that night, something made me stop. And that decision to stop, that 5-second choice to pull over and park, changed my life as much as it changed Walter Mitchell's, because Walter taught me something I'd forgotten in all my years of singing about the working man, the forgotten American, the left behind. He taught me that it's not enough to sing about them. You have to stop for them. You have to sit with them. You have to open the gate and bring them in. Walter Mitchell died 2 years ago, but he's more alive now than ever. He's alive in every opened door, every expanded table, every reconciled family. He's alive in his son David, who learned that success means nothing without love. He's alive in his grandchildren, who are carrying his message forward. He's alive in every single person who hears this story and decides to look for the Walter Mitchell in their life. The person on the outside who needs someone to say, "Come in, you belong here." Bruce played the song then, and 20,000 voices sang along. The documentary captured the faces in the crowd, veterans with their families, elderly people with tears streaming down their faces, young people holding their grandparents' hands a little tighter. The film's most powerful moment came near the end. Maria had managed to track down security footage from a camera across the street from the Mitchell house, footage that had captured the entire encounter between Bruce and Walter that 4th of July night. The grainy, silent video showed Bruce's car slowing, stopping, the rock star getting out and sitting next to the crying old man. It showed them talking, Bruce helping Walter up, the two of them walking to the gate. But what the footage revealed that no one had known before was this. Bruce had sat in his car for nearly 5 minutes before getting out. You could see him in the driver's seat, clearly debating, several times putting the car in drive before stopping again. 5 minutes of decision, of wrestling with whether to get involved, of choosing between driving on and stopping. Those 5 minutes, David said, watching the footage with tears in his eyes. Those 5 minutes when Bruce was deciding whether to stop, that's all of us. We all have those 5 minutes every day when we see someone hurting and we decide whether to keep driving or to stop. Bruce stopped. Thank God Bruce stopped. The documentary ended with footage from the most recent 4th of July on Maple Street. The celebration had grown so large it took up the entire block. There were carnival rides for kids, a stage for musicians, food trucks, and tables stretching as far as the eye could see. A banner hung across the street. Walter Mitchell Memorial Independence Day. Everyone welcome. David stood on the stage, now a grandfather himself, with little Walter, now 15, and looking remarkably like his namesake. 10 years ago tonight, David said to the crowd, my father sat on that sidewalk over there, excluded from this very yard. He sat there crying, believing he'd lost everything. And then a stranger stopped, a stranger who became a friend, a stranger who reminded us all that we belong to each other. My father used to say that America isn't about the individual pursuit of happiness. It's about the collective creation of it. It's about making sure your neighbor's happiness matters as much as your own. It's about remembering that independence without community is just isolation. So tonight, as we celebrate, I want you to make me a promise. Promise me you'll look for the people on the sidewalks. Promise me you'll stop when you see someone crying. Promise me you'll open your gates, expand your tables, share your celebrations. Promise me you'll remember Walter Mitchell and choose love over pride, inclusion over exclusion, forgiveness over resentment. The crowd roared its agreement, and fireworks began to explode overhead. The camera pulled back, showing the entire scene from above, hundreds of people celebrating together where once an old man had sat alone. Maria Santos provided the final narration. The story of Walter Mitchell and Bruce Springsteen is not unique because it's extraordinary. It's unique because it's ordinary, an ordinary moment when someone chose kindness over indifference, action over apathy, love over fear. It's a story that could happen anywhere, to anyone, at any time. The only question is, when your moment comes, when you see your Walter Mitchell on the sidewalk, will you stop? Will you open the gate? Will you remember that the celebration isn't complete until everyone is included? The documentary, titled The Sidewalk, a 4th of July Story, won 3 Emmys and an Academy Award. But more importantly, it sparked a movement. Schools showed it to teach empathy. Churches used it for sermons on redemption. Families watched it together and had difficult conversations about their own estrangements. Bruce Springsteen and David Mitchell appeared together on 60 Minutes to discuss the film and its impact. When asked what Walter would think of all this attention, David smiled. He'd be embarrassed at first. He'd say it was too much fuss, but then he'd realize that his story was helping other people come home, helping other families heal, and he'd be proud. Not proud of himself, but proud that his pain had purpose, that his suffering led to something beautiful. Bruce added, "Walter's story is America's story. We're a nation of people who've been on the sidewalk at some point. Immigrants, refugees, outcasts, rebels, and we're also a nation of people who've opened gates, who've said, 'Come in, there's room at the table.' When we remember that, when we live that, we're at our best." The ripple effect. Other cities, other sidewalks. In Boston, Massachusetts, Fire Chief Michael O'Brien watched the documentary with his elderly father, Patrick, from whom he'd been estranged for 3 years over Michael's divorce. As the credits rolled, Michael turned to his father and said, "Dad, I'm sorry. Come home." Patrick O'Brien moved back to Boston the next month, and their reconciliation inspired Michael to start a program where firefighters check on elderly residents, not just for safety, but for companionship. In Austin, Texas, tech entrepreneur Sandra Kim recognized herself in David Mitchell, successful, driven, and slowly pushing away her immigrant parents because they didn't fit her carefully curated image. She called them that night, apologizing in Korean and English, tears streaming down her face. Her parents moved to Austin, and Sandra started a program called Roots and Wings, helping other first-generation Americans navigate the balance between honoring where they came from and where they're going. In Portland, Oregon, veteran James Thunder, a Lakota man who'd served in Iraq, had been living on the streets for 2 years, too proud to ask his family for help after struggling with PTSD. He saw the documentary at a shelter and recognized Walter's pride, Walter's pain. He called his sister on the reservation. She drove 10 hours through the night to get him. Their reunion, captured by a local news crew who'd been doing a story on the shelter, became its own viral moment of healing. In Birmingham, Alabama, the Johnson and Washington families had been feuding for 4 generations over a property dispute that no one could even clearly remember anymore. The children from both families attended the same school, where a teacher showed the documentary. Moved by the story, the kids organized their own 4th of July in February celebration, inviting both families. The adults, shamed by their children's wisdom, finally buried the hatchet. The disputed property became a community garden where both families worked side by side. The academic study Dr. Patricia Roberts, a sociologist at Princeton, conducted a 5-year study on what she called the Walter Mitchell effect, the measurable impact of the story on family reconciliation rates. Her findings, published in the American Journal of Sociology, were staggering. 43% increase in adult children reaching out to estranged parents, 38% increase in successful family reconciliations lasting more than 1 year, 52% decrease in elderly isolation in communities that implemented open gate programs, 67% increase in intergenerational activities in communities aware of the story. What we're seeing, Dr. Roberts explained in her TED Talk, is the power of narrative to change behavior. The Walter Mitchell story gives people a script for reconciliation. It shows them it's possible. It gives them permission to be vulnerable, to apologize, to forgive. It makes opening the gate not just acceptable, but heroic. She showed brain scans taken while subjects watched the documentary. See this area lighting up? That's the empathy center of the brain. But more interesting is this area, the action planning cortex. People aren't just feeling sad for Walter. They're planning what to do about the Walters in their own lives. The music Tommy Mitchell's album, Songs from the Sidewalk, featuring the music his grandfather had taught him, plus new compositions inspired by that night, went platinum. But Tommy donated all proceeds to veterans' causes, saying, "Grandpa would haunt me if I profited from his pain." The album's closing track, a collaboration with Bruce Springsteen called Walter's Gate, became an anthem for the reconciliation movement. There's a gate in every heart that's been locked too long. There's a table in every home with an empty chair. There's a sidewalk in every town where someone sits alone, wondering if anyone will care. But gates can open, tables can expand, sidewalks can lead to front doors. All it takes is an extended hand to remind us what love is for. So be the one who stops the car, be the one who makes the call, be the one who says, "You've come so far, and there's room here for us all." The song was played at graduations, weddings, funerals, and military ceremonies. It was translated into dozens of languages. Children sang it in schools. Prisoners sang it in rehabilitation programs. Families sang it at reunions. The letter. Perhaps the most moving artifact from this entire saga was a letter Walter had written to Bruce, but never sent, found in his belongings after his death. David read it at the documentary premiere. "Dear Bruce, you'll probably never read this, and that's okay. I'm not even sure I'll send it, but I need to write it, need to put into words what you did for me, for my family, for my soul. I was ready to die that night. Not suicide, nothing like that, but I was ready to just fade away, to accept that I'd become invisible, irrelevant, forgotten. At 78 years old, after a lifetime of service and sacrifice, I was ready to accept that none of it had mattered. Then you stopped your car. You didn't know me. You had no reason to care. You're Bruce Springsteen, for Christ's sake. You've got better things to do than sit on a curb with a crying old Marine. But you stopped. And when you helped me up, you weren't just lifting my body off that sidewalk. You were lifting my spirit. When you walked me through that gate, you weren't just crashing a party. You were breaking down walls that had been building for years. You gave me my family back, but more than that, you gave me my dignity back. You reminded me that I mattered, that my story mattered, that every person sitting on a sidewalk matters. I've lived more in these past months than I did in the previous 5 years. I've held my grandchildren, reconciled with my son, found peace with my daughter-in-law. I've shared meals with strangers who became friends. I've told my stories to people who wanted to hear them. I've felt the sun on my face and known I was exactly where I belonged. All because you stopped your car. They say you're the voice of the working man, the poet of the American dream. But to me, you'll always be the man who saw me when I was invisible, who stopped when everyone else kept driving, who reminded me that no one is ever too old, too broken, or too forgotten to come home. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for caring. Thank you for showing my son that love is more important than pride. Thank you for showing my grandchildren that kindness can change the world. Thank you for showing me that even at the end of the road, new roads can open. I hope someday someone stops for you when you need it. I hope someday someone sees you on your sidewalk, whatever that might look like, and extends their hand. I hope someday you receive the gift you gave me, the gift of being seen, being valued, being brought home. Until then, know that every Sunday when my table fills with people, you're there. Every time someone tells me their story of reconciliation, you're there. Every time a gate opens for someone who's been excluded, you're there. You saved my life, Bruce. Not from death, but from something worse. From dying while still alive. From being forgotten while still breathing. From being erased while still existing. So thank you. From an old Marine to a rock star. From a father to a father. From one human being to another. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for caring. Thank you for opening the gate. Semper Fi, Walter Mitchell. There wasn't a dry eye in the theatre when David finished reading. Bruce himself, sitting in the audience, had to leave briefly to compose himself. Later, he would say it was the most meaningful letter he'd ever received, even though Walter never sent it. He didn't need to send it, Bruce explained. He lived it. Every day after that 4th of July, Walter lived his gratitude. He became the letter. He became the message. He became the open gate for others. The franchise. What started as one family's story in Freehold became a global phenomenon. Open gate dinners spread to 6 continents. The United Nations declared July 4th as International Reconciliation Day. The Vatican invited David Mitchell to speak about forgiveness. The Dalai Lama cited the Walter Mitchell story in a teaching about compassion. But David always brought it back to the personal, the individual, the human. "This isn't about creating some massive movement," he said at a conference in Chicago. "It's about one person seeing another person in pain and choosing to act. It's about one family deciding to heal. It's about one table adding one more chair. The minute we make it bigger than that, we lose what made it powerful, the simple human choice to care." Today, if you drive down Maple Street in Freehold, you'll see a small bronze plaque on the sidewalk where Walter Mitchell once sat. It reads, "On this spot, July 4th, 2023, Walter Mitchell sat excluded from his family's celebration. On this spot, Bruce Springsteen stopped to help. On this spot, a miracle of reconciliation began. May all who pass here remember, the gate is open, the table has room, you belong." Fresh flowers appear daily, left by strangers who've been moved by the story, by families who've reconciled, by veterans who've come home, by anyone who's ever been on the outside looking in. The Mitchell house still hosts Sunday dinners, now run by Tommy and his wife, with David and Jennifer as the elder statesmen. The table, custom-built to expand infinitely, regularly seats 50 or more. There's always room for one more. And sometimes, without announcement or fanfare, Bruce Springsteen shows up. He sits wherever there's a chair, eats whatever's being served, and listens to the stories being shared. He's just another guest at Walter's table, another person who needed to belong, another soul who found their way home. Because that's what Walter Mitchell taught them all, taught Bruce, taught David, taught the world. We all need to belong somewhere. We all need someone to stop for us. We all need the gate to open. And when it does, when someone says, "Come in, you belong here," that's independence, that's freedom, that's America, that's humanity at its best. The sidewalk is empty now. Everyone's at the table, and there's still room for more. There's always room for more. Welcome home.